The exact moment a bird decides your yard is home, and why most people miss it, and why most people miss it. There is a specific moment when a wild bird decides that your yard is no longer just a place it passes through, but a place it lives. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with a sound or a sign. It happens quietly, somewhere between the 3rd and the 30th visit, in a second so small that most people who have witnessed it never realized what they were watching. But it is real. It is measurable. It is, in fact, one of the most thoroughly studied transitions in the entire field of behavioral ecology. And once you understand what's actually happening inside a bird during that moment, what it's calculating, what it's weighing, what finally tips the decision, you will never look at your yard the same way again. Because that moment isn't random. It isn't gradual. It isn't even particularly mysterious once you know what to look for. It is a decision, a specific, cognitive, biologically driven decision made by a creature with a brain the size of a grape. And the precision with which that decision is made will stop you cold. Welcome back to Backyard Bird Mind. If you're new here, make sure what a bird is actually doing every time it visits. Every time a wild bird enters your yard, it is running an assessment. This is not metaphor, this is not anthropomorphism. It is the literal neurological function of the avian forebrain during a foraging visit to any location the bird has not yet fully mapped and categorized as safe. The bird is measuring. It is measuring caloric return, how much food is available relative to the energy spent acquiring it. It is measuring predator pressure, where the threats are, how close the cover is, how long the escape routes are. It is measuring competition, which other birds are here, what their dominance rank appears to be, whether the resources are worth contesting. It is measuring consistency. Was the food here last time, and the time before, and the time before that? All of this happens in real time, every visit, for weeks, sometimes for months, before a single decision about permanence is made. Researchers studying site fidelity in passerine birds, the large order that includes most common backyard species, have documented that individual birds will visit a novel food source dozens of times before showing any of the behavior. The 3 things that have to be true before the decision is possible. Before a bird will ever make your yard home, 3 conditions have to be met. Not approximately, not mostly, all 3, completely. The first is caloric reliability. The food has to be there. Not occasionally, not when you remember. Consistently, across enough consecutive visits that the bird's predictive model registers your yard as a stable caloric source rather than an intermittent one. Research on feeder dependency in black-capped chickadees has shown that birds distinguish between reliable and unreliable feeders within as few as 4 to 6 visits. A feeder that is empty on the 2nd or 3rd visit gets categorized differently in the bird's spatial memory than one that has been consistently stocked. The threshold for reliability is lower than most people expect, but it is absolute. A yard that sometimes has food is not the same thing to a bird's brain as a yard that has food. The second condition is predator manageability, not the absence of predators. That is not possible in any real yard, and birds know it. What a bird requires before accepting a territory is a clear and mapped understanding of where the threats are and how to survive them. A Cooper's hawk that hunts your yard unpredictably is a different problem than one the bird has learned to track. The cover in your yard, the shrubs, the dense plantings, the brush pile in the corner, the evergreen that holds its leaves in January, is not decoration. It is the escape infrastructure that makes the predator calculation solvable. The trigger. Ornithologists who study territory establishment in small passerines have identified what they call the commitment threshold, the point at which a bird transitions from exploratory foraging behavior to the specific suite of actions that indicate permanent territorial acceptance. The commitment threshold is not triggered by a single variable. It is triggered by the convergence of multiple variables across a single visit or a very small cluster of visits. The food was there, the hawk was tracked and escaped, another bird gave a warning call the bird understood, the cover closed around it cleanly, the human at the window didn't move, the water was fresh, the light was right. None of those things alone is enough. All of them together, in the right sequence, on the right visit, tips the threshold, and the bird does something it has never done in your yard before. It caches a seed. This is the exact moment. The behavior that ornithologists recognize as the clue.
What changes after the decision? The first thing you'll notice, if you know to look for it, is the approach. Before the commitment threshold, birds approach your feeder through a sequence of intermediate perches. They land somewhere 40 feet away, then 20, then 10. They scan between each landing. They are still running the predator assessment on every approach because they have not yet fully classified this space as known. After the threshold, the intermediate perches disappear. The bird comes directly, from the tree to the feeder in a single committed flight, without the scanning stops, without the hesitation. Not because the bird has become reckless, because it has already completed the assessment. Every approach is now a return trip rather than an exploration. The bird knows this space, and knowing it, it moves through it differently. The second change is temporal. Birds that have established a territory develop what researchers call circadian feeding windows, specific, narrow periods of the day, personal to each individual when they reliably visit their most stable food sources. A chickadee that has accepted your yard may arrive at your feeder within a 10-minute window of the same time every single morning. Not approximately, within 10 minutes, day after day, through weather, through brief absences, through seasonal change. This temporal locking is not driven by external cues. It is driven by the bird's internal circadian architecture, calibrated to the specific geography of its territory. The feeder has become a
Why almost everyone misses it. The reason the moment gets missed is that it doesn't look like a moment. It looks like a gradual shift. The bird seems to have slowly become more comfortable over many weeks, and most people interpret this as simple habituation, the bird getting used to the feeder, getting less afraid. Which is partly true, but it misses the specificity of what actually happened. The threshold did not move gradually. It crossed. There was a specific visit, a specific sequence of conditions, a specific seed that got cached in a specific piece of bark on a specific afternoon. And after that visit, the bird was a resident. Everything that looks gradual, the shorter approach route, the more consistent timing, the calmer demeanor, is the expression of a decision that was made in a single visit. Most people don't notice it because they are not watching for it. They are watching the feeder. They should be watching the bird. Not what it eats, but what it does with what it eats. Not when it arrives, but how it arrives. Not whether it seems comfortable, but whether it is behaving like a visitor evaluating a space or a resident moving through a territory it already knows. The difference is visible. Once you know what you're looking for, it is unmistakable.